Well, the Eastern Cape government is considering an official name change for several towns in the province. The program aims to transform the country's geographic landscape to represent its people. Now, the major metropolitan of East London could see a name change to Gompo, provided as an alternative name. Other proposed changes include King Williamstown. Berlin will also become Ntabozuko, and East London Airport could be called King Palo Airport. In 2018, the Eastern Cape town of Grahamstown was officially changed to Makhanda. Right now, on that note, we are joined by Fezeka Nkomonye. She is from the Department of Arts and Sports, Recreation and Culture to the Eastern Cape Department of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, chatting about these name changes proposed in the Eastern Cape province. Fezeka, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us here on Newsroom. Ultimately, why are name changes necessary? Just looking at the diverse cultural and even political values that exist in a multicultural South Africa, in a post-apartheid South Africa, why is this important?
Good morning, Liezle, and good morning to your AM edition of Newsroom. It's very important, Liezle, and your viewers at home, to firstly understand that any name change is a very emotive discussion. And I would want to urge people to engage in this discussion from a very objective point of view. You have made mention that any geographic name change is important or has a significance politically, and the cultural diversity of any people or nation. That's very true. You would remember that we come from a past that is not very, that was very brutal in terms of discrimination and racism. There are names that were associated with those whites who killed a lot of blacks. For instance, you made mention of Grahamstown. That changed to Makana. Graham is known as someone who butchered a lot of people in South Africa, particularly in the area of Makana, black people in the main. So we are doing this as government in a sense to foster nation building and social cohesion. We don't want to have names that depict what happened in the past or that bring about emotions that would inflict hatred towards a generation that is supposed to be cohesing socially. So in a bid to bring about and foster nation building, we have embarked on a process of changing these names. And it is a very important, Liezle, to note also that any name brings about a sense of identity. So I do not think that anyone would want to be associated with Graham, because the name Graham depicts what happened in the past, a past where a lot of people were killed by one person. So we are moving towards identifying ourselves with a transformed nation, a diverse nation, and that is why we are bringing about names that mean that have a significant meaning to those who live in this province.
All right. So as you've highlighted the motive, I mean, also just reading about how some of the names, as the areas were colonized, also, were subject to spelling errors and might have also lost the indigenous identity along with that. So perhaps even looking at changing it to its initial pronunciation is also something to look at. But I want to look specifically for now at the process of name changes. I mean, as you mentioned, it's a very sensitive subject in the country because it really becomes symbols of race and identity, just given the context and the legacy of South Africa's history. So what do these proposed name changes in the three areas I highlighted in my introduction ultimately represent for South Africa at large?
For instance, I'll give you an example of the name Berlin. Particularly here in Buffalo City, a lot of names are associated with our colonial master Britain. You have East London, you have Berlin, it's names that when you are in London, you can literally be like, okay, I am home, I am in Buffalo City. And the idea behind changing these names is to bring them back to where they were initially named after. For instance, when we want to name, when the proposal of King Palo Airport came in, it's in the history and nature of this province that a lot of towns and icons or geographical points of destination are named after chiefs and kings, because in isiXhosa you have a isizwe sikabanban, isizwe sikaPhalo. So when we want to change East London Airport, we want to indicate that this is an area that was ruled by King Phalo, and therefore its airport should be named after King Phalo. For instance, Berlin, we are bringing back Intabo Zuko because we know originally there was a mountain that was named Intabo Zuko there, and it changed because the settlers came in and thought it would be best fit to be called Berlin. So those are the names that we are basically moving back to the original names of these places.
All right. So there have also been some comments, though, Fezeka, in terms of the name change proposition, that it's promoting cultural exclusivity. Just looking at South Africa, who is one nation under many cultures, and perhaps also in the spirit of fostering national identity and social cohesion, based on a common identity rather. I mean, the DA has also come out to oppose this process at large. How do you handle these criticisms?
Everywhere else, Liezle, in the country, when there's been a name change, you notice that there's a trend of opposition, particularly from white people, when we are changing the name. And I said earlier on, I would want us, all of us as citizens of this country, to engage in this debate objectively and not subjectively. Because, for instance, why would one want to be associated with Berlin? That for me, that name does not have a meaning. And if you were to go back to its original name and understand what that Ntabo Zuko stands for, it stands for a place where battles were fought. So for us, it's not to say we are doing this at the exclusion of the others, but it is to say, let us all look at it at how does it, going forward, how does it affect the generations that are coming after us? Do we want to create a nation where, when we are telling our story or our history, you are raising a lot of negative emotions from the black youth? Or do you want to have a united South Africa? Do you want to have a united South Africa or a united province, even where white young ones can identify with the history? Because I am certain that no one would want to be identified as related to someone who killed, or owning up a brand of someone who killed a lot of people. So we are creating a nation that seems to be unified, or we want a nation that is unified, that tells a story that we moved from that hatred system to a more unified system.
And I mean, it is an attempt on government's part, perhaps, to achieve that social cohesion and national identity. But we can't also ignore some of these other social ills that are plaguing the country at large. The issues of GBV and the high rates of femicide in the country to date. Many also questioning the timing of this process that is being put forth, and the emphasis on changing names at this point when there are so many other social ills that remain swept under the carpet. How do you respond to those comments?
Look, Liezle, it's not even a matter of putting other responsibilities at the sideline and focusing mainly on the changing of the names. As we go about delivering on our mandate of nation building and social cohesion, these are some of the things that we need to look into. Why are we having gender-based violence? Why are we so angry as a nation? And one way of dealing with this anger is correcting what has happened in the past and channeling all our energies in ensuring that we protect each other, we protect the vulnerable, we do not expose them to gender-based violence and femicide. So it's not a matter of prioritizing name change over gender-based violence and femicide. We are doing all we could, but also ensuring that we do not neglect some parts of our mandate as a department.
All right. And then just also, given the fact that we're in a COVID-19 pandemic, Why are the changes taking place during this time? And we've seen issues of corruption, we've seen issues of, just people who have lost their livelihoods and income streams, and perhaps that area on a priority list. We're just trying to understand how government plans to balance that and also cater to citizens' needs at large. How do you respond to that?
Standardization of names or name changes is a process, Liezle. It started a long time ago. The process of consultation, in fact, when the process starts, it's not started by government. Community members submit a proposal to change the name of a certain place. And the process is it's a long process. It usually takes about 6 months because there's consultations involved. So it's not a process that started yesterday. Consultation started as early as November last year. So we are concluding a process that we started a long time ago. So it is not to say we woke up yesterday and decided that East London is now going to change to Kompo. So it has been a process, and a process that needs to be concluded, because in terms of the law and regulations, we need to start and conclude a process.
Fezeka, we are running out of time. I just want to look at that process that you highlight. So it's been 6 months of consultation. Where to from here? How long do we perhaps start seeing implementation results, etc.?
At the end of the process, people were given 21 days to submit objections to the proposal. Once there are objections, we are taken to court as government, it takes time for the courts to deliberate on the matter and then give a verdict. But because we have not been taken to court, we have since concluded the process of changing the names, particularly of those of Buffalo City. So it will only now be a process of implementing the name change. Soon you will be seeing King Palo Airport instead of East London Airport.
All right, so we are obviously in conversation with MEC for Sports, Arts and Culture in the Eastern Cape, Fezeka Nkomonye. She was chatting to us about the province embarking on officiating name changes to some towns in order to reflect the languages and identity of the majority at large.